That was great. Thank you so much. It's now my privilege to have the opportunity to have a conversation with my dear friend of many years, Rob Pace, who is not only one of maybe the smartest person I know, but he's also just an incredibly good guy. His background, he was in the investment banking business for many years. He was a senior partner at Goldman Sachs and ultimately ran their global capital markets, which is a big responsibility you can imagine at Goldman Sachs. And he retired, and then he just couldn't sit still. And so he created what is now HundredX, which is, I think, one of the most spectacular mission companies that I could even imagine. I'm having to talk about that in a bit, but just why don't you give him a big round of applause for being here. So Rob, maybe in the context of talking about what HundredX is, I see this, I mean, when we look at disruptive businesses, for a living, and I think that you may have founded a business that might be one of the most disruptive businesses that I could imagine. Talk about the inspiration behind HundredX and what are you disrupting? What is the problem you're looking to solve?
Okay, thank you. By the way, hi everyone, and I'm a big Mike Moe fan, so it's really a privilege for me to be with him as always. So let me start with the end. So let's just take the global management consulting industry, $100+ billion, and basically experts, a team of experts fly in, might be 18 months, $10 million assignment to help leaders figure out how to navigate a changing landscape. Or my old industry, the investment industry, is very short-term oriented. Did the company make their earnings this quarter or not? And so business leaders are on kind of this hamster wheel of making every quarter, and that's been written, that short-termism is, I think, something that a summit like this could hopefully address. And I could go on and on, advertising that is disconnected with reality. So imagine for a second if there was a core data set that you had confidence in, that was just the truth about what everyday consumers really thought. What were their best alternatives? What was their experience? What would make things better for them? And imagine, imagine maybe instead of surveying people, we listened to people. And listening, the difference between survey, you've already decided what's important, and so you extract that. I could ask Mike a bunch of questions. Listening is, what do I need to know? And it's a different posture. So imagine there was this very comprehensive database that was based on listening and that allowed you to basically make decisions based on the genius of the crowd. And that maybe the experts helped, form it, but that the core was just the truth, right? That would transform industry after industry. And so 10 years ago, 3 of us and a dog set out to try to transform business by figuring out how we could create the greatest listening company. And of course, the biggest question is, how do you get that data set? So that's what we're up to, which is obviously a very large ambition.
So, and we're going to get to some of the insights that you have, but talk about the uniqueness of how you get that information, because I think this is where this becomes, I think, both genius, but remarkably inspiring.
Well,
so pay attention to this, please.
No. So after I left Goldman, I had the privilege to be the national chair of the second largest charity, the Salvation Army. And just in the United States, the Salvation Army has 30 million beneficiaries, right, in every zip code, and it's highly diverse, et cetera, et cetera. And any of you who run a nonprofit know the number one issue for a nonprofit is raising money. In fact, it's kind of the bane of your existence. You have this mission-based mindset. But what if we could basically take that audience, those passionate supporters, the volunteers, the people you benefit, and they could become the group that creates this data set that we want. So we hit on this idea of a fundraiser, and I've been very fortunate. I have some of my partners here today. We've raised almost $100 million so that we could buy the data. So here's how it works. Let's say your kid's in a band, and the school district doesn't have any money, but you're very passionate because it's a big part of their life. So the school district might go out to all the parents, et cetera, and say, there's this crazy company, HundredX, it's raised a lot of money, and they're going to pay us if you all, over a 30-day period, get on and just start telling the truth about the brands that you use. So I know Netflix, and here's what I like about it, don't like about it, here's how much I'm going to use them, here's what I'm going to do in the future. I drive a Toyota, I shop at Dollar General. And you put together your whole portfolio, and each time you do it, we generally create up to $2, and it takes you about a minute to go through. So what we've done...
It's on an app.
What's that?
It's on an app.
Yeah, it's a digital experience. So let's say you did that 50 times, it's $100, right? So you've now taken your opinion and made it $100. Now, if 1,000 people do that, we write a check for $100,000. And we have then the truth of the crowd. So fast forward, we have 1,000 nonprofit partners who we fundraise for them. They give us that data set that I was talking about. So the entire ecosystem is, we have that thing that helps leaders, investors see the truth from normal consumers who have no incentive to cheat, and every second of every day we give them away money to charity. So that's our mission, right, that blend. And so that's our data set and what we do.
Give a little bit more here, because there's people have big-time privacy concerns and worry that their data is going to be used for something else, so they start getting pestered or blasted by marketers. I mean, how does that work? How do you protect that?
Yeah, we call that data for good. There's obviously a lot of data practices which are not good. So if you've ever run a nonprofit, the first thing is you're not going to want to give up your list to anybody. So you have to design it so people opt in. So the first thing is the nonprofit has to go and say, do you want to do this? That's the first step. The second thing is you need to tell them, look, all we want to know is the truth about your brands. If you give us feedback on Chipotle, all of a sudden you're not going to see in your feed, ads for Chipotle. We just want to know, the truth. We anonymize it. So if, for example, you're a buyer of our data, you know demographics, but you obviously won't know the person. So there's a number of checks that you have to meet. And then, of course, the most important thing is, after you've done this enough nonprofits start telling their friends, like, hey, it's shocking how many people say, wow, we actually got a check. Like, we didn't think you were going to actually, like, it was too good to be true. And so the first part was just convincing the
People
first...
thought it was just fun. People thought it was just fun giving their opinion.
Right? No, but
seriously.
Yeah, the nonprofit leaders were like, because business has not always been great to nonprofit leaders, right? They've often promised things and haven't delivered. So you have to build that credibility over time. And I might add, just as an aside, we're very fortunate. We work with big partners like Boys and Girls Clubs, et cetera. But there's something about those small entrepreneurs, and we try to do it in every zip code, that are just like 25 grand really makes their year. That's really just, those stories are kind of the fuel for me, certainly.
But you're not a not-for-profit. You're a for-profit, and you have, who's paying for this data, and what kind of insights are they getting?
Yeah, so that's a very deliberate choice. And our ability, so historically, if you've worked in the nonprofit space, you had to do so very sacrificially, right? It was very hard on your families, you had to do everything. So what if we could create actually an attractive business that also did good in terms of our ability to hire great talent, et cetera, et cetera. So one, that was a very deliberate choice. For me personally, because I was just kind of hit by the lucky stick at an early age, I don't take a salary. I've committed to give 90% of the company that I own to charity, but a lot of the people who work at our company aren't in that position. So that's how we came up with this hybrid model.
But talk about, so who are the customers that...
Yeah, they're business leaders who are curious. They're business leaders who don't say, we've got this. I can't tell you how many times it's like, oh, we got it, right? I'll just give you one example. 5G. People paid, $50 billion to put together these networks, and our data, nobody cared. See, the thing about listening is you figure out, does it matter, right? Because they're not talking about it. So most people now don't have it. The consumer's changing. You have disruptive technology, et cetera, et cetera. So curious business leaders. And then also investors, because you see there's a difference between good and bad revenue. You might be able to produce very high short-term revenues through sales and other things, but if you're delivering a lousy product to to your consumer, it's not sustainable. So it's those two groups who are who buy our data.
Not politics?
I get asked all the time, like, are we going to do politics? Because, we have like 10 million data points, right? No, is sort of the answer.
But you could.
We could.
So talk about this Forbes initiative, which is pretty cool. You guys did a joint partnership with Forbes, our friends at Forbes, which was great to see how that developed. Talk about what that's about. You got 10 million data points that you receive. What are the insights you're getting from that? What's this partnership about? Where do you hope to go with it?
Yeah, so Forbes does a very, very good job with lists. So we've powered a number of these lists. One was the Customer Experience All-Stars. The most recent one was Social Impact. And so actually I'm just writing a piece right now. So here's a few takeaways from those 10 million data points. And I'm pretty passionate about this. I could talk all day. So the first thing is, if you go through one of our feedback flows, let's use, again, Chipotle, you're going through and you're talking about the price, the quality, the ingredients, et cetera. But we have a button where you can say the brand's values and my trust. And for everyone we do. And you can also leave an open-ended comment. So we have a pretty good way of analyzing like what people care. So the first thing you should know is, let's take restaurants. Over 50% of the time they're going to comment on quality and price. But only 22% of the time do they call out that sort of values, right? So that's pretty interesting, right? Only 22% of the time. Now I want to be clear, if we said to people, does sustainability matter? I think we'd get 90%. But when we say you're just going through a brand, we get 22%. So what are our takeaways from that? Number one, right now, brand values and trust, they operate in the background, not the foreground, when you're making a purchase decision, right? That's number one. Number two, it's a massive opportunity for businesses to stand out, and here's why. Because when it is pressed, it is the single most predictive thing of future performance. In other words, if you really align, actually there's one other, taste. If you have lousy taste at a restaurant, that's one higher. But out of 200,
yes.
What's that?
Yeah.
But here's the point. Businesses, if they can get that purpose, and we'll talk in a second about how, if they can get that purpose through, it drives more purchase than anything else you can do. But right now, most businesses are not breaking through. We can talk about why.
Why?
Okay, so why? Okay, so what have we learned? Number one, you need to integrate it with your business. So I'll give you an example. If we query millions of comments from customers about, let's take things like UN principles or net neutral or carbon neutral, we find almost no comments. It's just not how customers think. We find thousands of comments about Burt's Bees integrate sustainability in their product. Or if your pet dies, Chewy has special programs for that, how they donate the dog food. So those of you who are entrepreneurs, you need to basically integrate it with business. So this is kind of one of the key insights, is they're not separate things. It's not like profits and purpose. You need to think about it as an integrated thing. The second thing is, if you don't treat me well as a customer, I don't believe all of your doing good public things. So I'll give you one example. I won't call them out, but we have a bank that was listed as, number one by the experts on ESG, right? Because they give
Silicon
money.
Valley Bank?
What's that?
Silicon Valley?
No, it wasn't Silicon Valley. I'm not going to tell you. So, because, right, they have all these policies.
Too soon.
They have all these policies for their community, et cetera, all of which are great. But they charge very high interest rates, very high fees, et cetera. And as you as a consumer, if you don't treat me well when nobody's looking, I'm not going to believe any of the other stuff. So the key, and maybe if I could emphasize one thing, is it's performance plus purpose. If our data, the holy grail is performance plus purpose. So whatever you do with your business, whether it be nonprofit, as an organization, et cetera, you've got to get that combination right, and it starts with how you treat me as a consumer.
Yeah, so talk about, in this list, came up with leaders. Talk about maybe the top 2 or 3 and what you learned. What did people say about them?
So the tops were, and I should introduce my colleague who had strategy, Andre Benjamin, here in the first row. Andre actually writes the check for thousands of nonprofits. If you have a nonprofit, you should meet Andre. Number 1 was REI. Number 2 was Subaru. Number 3 was HEB, et cetera, et cetera. Now, let me just give you a couple of examples. Like HEB really leaned into community support. Not only did they do a good job as a grocer, community support. Subaru has a number of sustainability and other practices, et cetera, that are very relevant to consumers. REI, how they label things, et cetera, et cetera. So those are just some of the things. But here's an interesting insight. I mentioned we have those 2 lists, customer experience and social impact. You can't get on that social impact list if you don't do well with customer experience. There was literally no single company that were in the top 300 for social impact that weren't at least in the top half of customer experience. So we were shocked at the overlap, right? If that makes sense. Like, this is why I keep on saying it. They're not discrete things, right? It's not do good and a business. It's integrated.
Yeah, so talk about fast forward this. You know, you said $100 million you've given to good causes since HundredX has been formed. As the flywheel continues, what do you think this could mean? What's your dream 5 years from now? What does this look like in terms of both the impact you're having with these causes as well as the insights you're able to provide for businesses to do better?
Yeah, so here's my dream. On a personal note, I've always been seeking this notion of the blend. I was created to be a business person. How do I do business and do good? So 1, trying to be a lighthouse company for what a blend might look like. And just think of nonprofits. What nonprofits have is the audience. Imagine if we could create billions and billions and billions of dollars through innovative business models that just recognize the ability of nonprofits to solve problems for business. Because right now, businesses give to nonprofits as part of social corporate responsibility, right? Kind of they're doing good. But what if nonprofits could solve problems? What if you could get 100 million people to try your product? It'd be worth several billion dollars So those of you who run a nonprofit, one of your greatest assets is your audience. So 1, create this model where we create funding for nonprofits. 2, creating a world where people are heard. And we particularly focus on working with highly diverse nonprofits so that business leaders can hear kind of the true wisdom of the crowd, not the loud, or not those who are overrepresented, but hear from everybody. And then 3rd, we talked a little bit about this invisible hand. And, I'm probably in the camp that capitalism needs a refresh. So imagine if business leaders got credit for doing the right thing in terms of how they were valued, right? And it wasn't just about short-term earnings. I think where Wall Street really let the world down in 2008, 2007 was short-termism, forgetting about kind of long-term needing to create products that do good. Social media has done a lot of that more recently in some of the products. Imagine if you couldn't be valued highly by the markets if the crowd was saying, wait a sec, they're not doing good, right? That's how we're going to create sort of a new invisible hand. And that's how, to me, that's 2.0 or whatever term you want to use around kind of a future of free markets.
Yeah, I think that's a very powerful vision. What I'm going to do now is trade the mic. I'm going to bring Jeannie Allen back up and First Lady Stitt, and they're going to continue the conversation with you. Thank you.